The chapel stones are cold beneath your fingers as you awaken, disoriented and gasping like a newborn taking its first violent breath. Above you, fractured light filters through stained glass depicting battles you don't remember but somehow know you're destined to repeat. The Chapel of Anticipation. What a cruel name for this liminal space between death and something far worse than dying. You rise, muscles remembering movements your mind has forgotten, and there it is. That golden mote of light dancing just beyond your reach, beckoning you forward with the seductive whisper of purpose. Grace, they call it. But grace from what? Grace from whom? Welcome, fellow seekers of uncomfortable truths, to Keen 7 Lore, where today we're peeling back the heroic veneer that covers one of gaming's most disturbing revelations. You see, Elden Ring tells us we're the chosen one, the Tarnished of no renown who will mend the shattered world and restore order to the lands between. But what if I told you that every step you take toward that throne, every boss you fell, every NPC whose quest line you complete, what if all of it makes you not the hero of this tale, but its greatest villain? Think about it. You wake up in a world that has found its equilibrium, however broken it might seem. The shattering happened long ago. The demigods have carved out their territories, their subjects have adapted to their rule, and while it's far from perfect, it's stable. The war has gone cold. The suffering has become routine rather than acute. And then you arrive, pulled from your grave by threads of light that promise glory. And within days, weeks at most, you've reignited every conflict, murdered every ruler, and left nothing but ash and ambiguity in your wake. The lands between didn't need a savior. It needed to be left alone to heal. But healing doesn't satisfy the flame of ambition that burns in every tarnished heart, does it? This isn't just another theory video about how perspective changes everything, though it does. This is about examining the evidence that FromSoft has carefully laid before us, breadcrumbs leading to a terrible realization. We are playing through the memories of someone who destroyed everything they touched, all while believing themselves righteous. The genius isn't in hiding this truth. It's in making us complicit in it, eager participants in our own damnation. Consider for a moment the words that greet you at the very beginning of your journey. Not from some benevolent guide, but from the corpse of another Tarnished who tried this path before you. Though the path be broken and uncertain, claim your place as Elden Lord. Broken and uncertain. Not noble, not righteous, not even necessary. Just broken. And into that brokenness you stride with blade drawn and ambition burning, ready to break it further in pursuit of a crown that might not even exist anymore in any meaningful sense. If you're already feeling that uncomfortable twist in your stomach, that recognition of something you've always suspected but never wanted to acknowledge, then I genuinely appreciate you joining me for this deep dive into darkness. And if you're finding value in this re-examination of everything you thought you knew about your role in the lands between, hitting that like button truly helps these explorations reach other lore seekers who might be ready to confront these uncomfortable truths. Your support makes a real difference in helping this video navigate YouTube's algorithm and find its way to fellow players who felt that nagging doubt about whether they're really the good guy in this story. The flame of ambition burns differently in every Tarnished, but it burns toward the same end: consumption. When Melina first finds you, broken and defeated after your inevitable death to the grafted scion, she doesn't offer you redemption or salvation. She offers you an accord, a deal with carefully chosen words. I can play the role of maiden. Play the role. Not I am your maiden, or I will guide you to glory. She's performing a part in a play whose script was written long before either of you drew breath, and she knows it. But you think you're improvising, making choices, following your own path. That delusion of agency makes you the perfect instrument of destruction. Let's talk about what separates the Tarnished from every other protagonist in FromSoftware's pantheon of doomed heroes. The chosen undead in Dark Souls was cursed, fighting to preserve or change a world already cycling toward its end. The good hunter in Bloodborne was trapped in a nightmare, seeking escape or understanding. Even Sekiro, bound by duty and resurrection, fought to protect rather than conquer. But the Tarnished? The Tarnished fights because fighting is what Tarnished do. You're not cursed. You were exiled and chose to return. You're not trapped. You could theoretically leave at any time, abandon this doomed quest. You're not protecting anyone. Every NPC who trusts you either dies or wishes they had. The greater will, that cosmic entity everyone speaks of in hushed tones, abandoned the lands between long before you arrived. The Two Fingers, its vassals, haven't received new instructions in so long they've calcified into rigid doctrine, interpreting silence as approval for increasingly desperate measures. And their most desperate measure? Calling back the Tarnished, the very beings they once deemed too dangerous, too ambitious, too hungry to remain in paradise. Think about what that means. You weren't exiled for weakness or unworthiness. You were exiled because even in the height of the Golden Order's power, when the Erdtree's light touched every corner of the realm, you and your kind were considered too dangerous to keep around. Godfrey, the first Tarnished, conquered the lands between in Marika's name, and when there was nothing left to conquer, when his usefulness as a weapon had expired, she stripped him of grace and sent him away. Not as punishment, but as storage. A weapon too dangerous to keep loaded, but too valuable to destroy. And when the lands between needed conquering again, when the demigods refused to move against each other decisively enough to produce a clear victor, that's when grace suddenly, conveniently, found you again. You're not a chosen hero. You're a recalled weapon of mass destruction, and the moment you picked up that first sword, you began fulfilling your purpose. The systematic hunting begins almost immediately. You don't stumble into conflict, you seek it out. Every church you find has been converted into a merchant's shelter or a place of grace, the sacred repurposed for your convenience. Every ruin you explore yields tools for greater violence. The world reshapes itself around your need for progression, for power, for the next piece of equipment that will make the killing easier. And we call this an adventure, a hero's journey, when really it's a crusade of extinction against beings who, until you arrived, were essentially unkillable. Take Godrick the Grafted, your first real divine victim. Yes, he's a monster who grafts the limbs of others onto himself in a desperate bid for power, but he's also the last of the golden lineage's weakest branch, a demigod so pathetic that other demigods barely acknowledge his existence. He's holed up in Stormvile Castle, playing at being a lord over servants who follow him more out of habit than loyalty. His crimes are local, contained, almost pitiful in scope. And then you arrive, cut through his soldiers like wheat, corner him in his throne room, and put him down like a rabid dog. Not because he poses a threat to the wider world, not because his death will improve anyone's life, but because he stands between you and a great ruin. Lowly Tarnished, he calls you, and he's right. You are lowly. You're beneath these demigods in every way that matters except one. You can come back from death while they cannot. Your advantage isn't skill or righteousness or divine favor. It's simply that you can throw yourself at them, again and again, until you find the pattern, the weakness, the moment of vulnerability. You're not defeating them in glorious combat. You're wearing them down through attrition, using your cursed undeath as a bludgeon against their fading immortality. If you're finding yourself reconsidering every boss fight you've completed, every victory you've celebrated, then you're beginning to understand the true horror of what FromSoft has created here. Consider subscribing to join our community of lore seekers who aren't afraid to examine the darker implications of the games we love. Your support genuinely makes these deep investigations possible, and together we can continue pulling back the veil on gaming's most fascinating and disturbing narratives. The death of Star's Courge Radahn might be the clearest example of the Tarnished's true nature. Here was a demigod who, even in madness, held back the very stars themselves to protect the lands between from cosmic horrors. His gravitational mastery wasn't just a combat technique, it was a shield protecting everyone from threats they couldn't even comprehend. The Carian royals knew this, which is why they organized the festival in his honor, a mercy killing that at least granted him a warrior's death. But you don't grant him that mercy, do you? You don't wait for the festival's proper time or respect its traditions. You arrive when you're ready, fight him with whatever allies you can summon, and put him down not to free him from his suffering, but to claim his power and unlock the path to Nokron. The moment Radahn falls, the stars resume their motion. Meteors crash into Limgrave. The sealed underground cities become accessible, releasing ancient threats that had been contained for millennia. You've literally brought down the sky. And for what? To continue your path toward a throne that might not even exist in any form you can comprehend. Every NPC celebrates your victory, calls you a hero for ending Radahn's suffering, but none of them seem to realize what you've actually done. You've removed one of the last protective barriers between the lands between and the cosmic void, and you've done it without hesitation or regret. Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy, presents an interesting case. Here's a demigod who openly embraced villainy, who fed himself to a god-devouring serpent and invited Tarnished to join him in his blasphemous crusade. You could argue that killing him is heroic, that you're stopping a monster who threatens the very order of existence. But consider this. Rykard was contained. He was trapped in Mat Gelmir, playing out his fantasies of godhood with a small cult of followers. His threat was theoretical, potential, ultimately self-limiting. Until you arrived, he was just another pocket tyrant in a world full of them, no more or less dangerous than any other regional power. But you don't just kill Rykard. You destroy his entire organization, murder every member of the Volcano Manor, betray Tanith, who trusted you with their secrets. You systematically eliminate not just the threat, but anyone who might remember it, anyone who might carry on its ideals. This isn't justice, it's extermination. And when Tanith, broken by grief, devours Rykard's corpse in a desperate attempt to preserve something of him, what do? You can kill her too, of course. The game even rewards you for it. Mohg, Lord of Blood, hidden away in his palace beneath the earth, committed terrible crimes. He kidnapped Miquella, tried to elevate him to godhood through blood rituals, created a dynasty of violence and perversion. Killing him seems unquestionably right. But again, look at the broader context. Mohg was underground, literally and figuratively. His dynasty was a secret thing, recruiting from the desperate and outcast. He wasn't expanding his territory or threatening the surface world. He was nursing his obsessions in the dark, a cancer that had calcified rather than spread. You descend into his realm not because anyone asked you to save Miquella, who might not even want to saving, but because you need his great rune. You're not a rescuer. You're a grave robber with pretensions. The most heartbreaking betrayal might be Morgott, the Omen King. Here was a demigod who, despite being reviled and rejected for his cursed blood, remained loyal to the Golden Order that despised him. He defended Leyndell when all others fled or turned conqueror. He maintained the thrones of his absent siblings, hoping against hope that one of them would return to claim their rightful place. He fought not for glory or power, but for duty, for love of a world that never loved him back. And when you arrive at the foot of the Erd Tree, when you demand passage to claim a throne you haven't earned, he stands against you, not as a tyrant, but as the last faithful guardian of a broken system he still believes might be healed. Have it writ upon thy meagre grave, felled by King Morgott, last of all kings, he declares. And in that moment, he's not wrong. He is the last of all kings, the last one who remembers what kingship was supposed to mean. Service, sacrifice, protection of the realm. Every other demigod has descended into madness, perversion, or absence. Only Morgott remains at his post, and you kill him for it. You kill him because he stands between you and your ambition, and when he dies, he apologizes to his mother for failing. Not for his cursed birth, not for his appearance, but for failing to stop you. His last thoughts are of duty unfulfilled, and you step over his dissolving corpse to claim your prize. But perhaps the greatest evidence of your villainy isn't in the demigods you kill, it's in the regular people whose lives you destroy along the way. Every merchant you find was driven underground by persecution, found refuge in hidden corners of the world, and managed to survive the shattering through careful neutrality. They'll trade with anyone, threaten no one, just trying to exist in a world gone mad. And what do you do when you find them? You mark their locations on your map like resources to be harvested. Some players even kill them for their bell bearings, consolidating their goods for convenience. These aren't enemies. They're refugees, survivors, and you treat them like walking item drops. The various NPCs you encounter each have their own tragic stories, their own goals and dreams, and almost without exception, following their quest lines leads to their death or despair. Millicent, infected with scarlet rot, seeks her destiny and finds it at your blade if you choose betrayal for a slightly different talisman. Dee, Hunter of the Dead, dies because you introduced him to fear. Roger, trying to help his friend, ends up dead in a ditch. Even Patches, comic relief that he is, can be murdered for the crime of being annoying. You are a walking apocalypse, and everyone who gets close to you burns. Alexander, the warrior Jar, might be the most tragic of all. This gentle giant seeks strength through honorable combat, collecting the remains of warriors to add to his essence. He helps you fight Radahn, assists you against the fire giant, always cheerful, always supportive. He considers you his closest friend, his inspiration. And in the end, he asks you to kill him in a duel so that his essence might make you stronger. He literally asks you to consume him, to add his strength to yours, and presents this as an honor. You've so thoroughly corrupted the concept of friendship that beings consider it a privilege to die by your hand and be absorbed into your legend. The maiden Melina deserves special consideration. She knows from the beginning that traveling with you means her death. She doesn't hide this from you, but she doesn't fully explain it either. She presents herself as a guide, a helper, someone who believes in your mission. But pay attention to her words as the journey progresses. She grows increasingly disturbed by your actions, questioning whether the path you're walking leads anywhere worth going. By the time you reach the mountaintops of the giants, she's begging you to reconsider, to find another way. And when you insist on burning the Erd Tree, using her as kindling to open your path to godhood, she doesn't resist. She goes to her death with dignity, but her final words are a warning, not a blessing. Unless, of course, you've found the three fingers and accepted the Frenzied Flame. Then she lives, but at what cost? She survives only to witness you become something worse than anything the lands between has seen before, a bearer of the flame that seeks to melt all existence back into one. She promises to hunt you down, to kill you before you can end everything. You've managed to turn the one person who believed in you into your sworn enemy. That takes a special kind of villainy. Let's examine the endings, shall we? Because surely, after all this destruction, you must achieve something worthwhile. The Age of Fracture, the default ending, sees you claim the throne of Elden Lord. But Lord of what? You've killed every other demigod, destroyed the existing power structures, left a vacuum that you fill with. What exactly? The game doesn't show us your reign because there's nothing to show. You're Lord of ashes and echoes, ruling over a kingdom of the dead and the dying. The Age of Order, guided by Goldmask's rune, promises to perfect the Golden Order by removing the possibility of anyone betraying it again. You create a world of absolute law, no freedom, no choice, no possibility of change. You've become the ultimate tyrant, enforcing order through metaphysical chains that bind everyone to your interpretation of righteousness. Is this better than what came before? You've replaced flawed gods with an inflexible system that you control. That's not salvation, it's domestication, fear's age, Godrick. The Duskborn brings those who live in death into the order of the world. You're literally forcing everyone to accept the walking corpses that plague the lands, making undeath a normalized part of existence. The people who survived the shattering now have to share their world with their deceased relatives, walking reminders of everyone they've lost. You've turned grief into law, made mourning mandatory and eternal. The Age of Stars, Ranni's ending, might seem like the best option. You're removing the influence of the outer gods, setting the world free from divine intervention. But you're also leaving with Ranni on a 1,000-year journey through the cosmos, abandoning the lands between to figure things out for themselves after you've murdered all their leaders and destroyed their social structures. You've created a power vacuum and then immediately left, ensuring centuries of chaos as survivors fight over the scraps of civilization you've left behind. The blessing of despair, the Dung Eater's ending, is so obviously evil it barely needs discussion. You're cursing everyone and their descendants forever, spreading the omen curse to all beings, creating a world of universal suffering. The fact that this is even an option you can choose shows what kind of person the Tarnished really is. Someone who would damn the entire world out of spite or curiosity. And then there's the Lord of Frenzied Flame. This ending reveals the ultimate truth about the Tarnished's nature. Given the option, you can choose to burn everything, to reduce all existence to primal chaos, to end all suffering by ending all life. The three fingers don't force this on you. You seek them out, strip naked in front of them, and embrace the apocalypse willingly. This isn't corruption or manipulation, it's revelation. You were always capable of this. The potential for absolute destruction was always within you, waiting for the right excuse to manifest. What makes this all worse is that you had alternatives at every step. You could have refused Melina's accord, lived a simple life in Limgrave, maybe become a merchant or a farmer. When you learned about the demigods and their great runes, you could have decided it wasn't your problem to solve. Even after killing one or two, you could have stopped, decided you'd done enough damage, refused to continue the cycle of violence. But you didn't, did you? Because the game told you this was your quest, your destiny, your right. FromSoft has created the ultimate critique of the Chosen One narrative, the hero's journey, the very concept of the player as protagonist. In most games, the world exists for you to save or conquer, and your actions are justified by the narrative framework. But Elden Ring asks, what if the world doesn't need saving? What if your intervention makes everything worse? What if the chosen one is chosen not for their virtue, but for their usefulness as a weapon? The brilliance is in how the game never explicitly tells you you're the villain. It lets you feel heroic, celebrates your victories, rewards your progression. NPCs thank you for your help even as your help destroys them. The music swells during boss fights, making you feel epic and important. The game systems all reinforce the idea that you're doing what you're supposed to do. But if you pay attention, if you look at the actual consequences of your actions rather than the immediate rewards, the truth becomes undeniable. You are the Tarnished, and you are the villain. Not a tragic villain, not a sympathetic villain, not even a particularly complex villain. You're the kind of villain who believes they're the hero, which makes you more dangerous than any conscious evil. Mohg knows he's a monster. Rykard revels in blasphemy. Dung-Eater embraces his curse. But you think you're saving the world while you burn it down, and that delusion makes you unstoppable. The merchants have a song they sing, those poor souls you find hiding throughout the lands. It tells of the great burning, of how their ancestors were buried alive for the crime of summoning the Frenzied Flame. They were punished for threatening to end the world. And now here you are, considering that same ending as a valid option. The merchants were buried for less than what you actually accomplish in every playthrough. They were criminals for contemplating what you execute without hesitation. This interpretation casts every mechanic in a different light. The sights of grace that guide you aren't benevolent waypoints. They're a leash, pulling you toward greater acts of destruction. The ability to level up isn't growth. It's mutation, becoming less human and more weapon with every rune you consume. Even the messages other players leave, supposedly helpful guidance from fellow Tarnished, become the scattered notes of other villains, other destroyers, helping you optimize your path of devastation. When speedrunners find ways to break the game, to kill bosses in seconds or skip entire areas, they're not breaking the narrative, they're perfecting it. The Tarnished's role is to destroy as efficiently as possible, and every exploit, every optimized build, every two-shot bar boss kill is just the logical endpoint of what you were always meant to be. The game doesn't break when you become overpowered. It reveals its true nature. You were always meant to be unstoppable, inevitable, the ending that comes for all things. The common soldiers you fight, the knights and footmen, and even the grotesque creatures wandering the lands. They're not evil. They're what remains of civilization, holding their posts, following their last orders, trying to maintain some semblance of the world they knew. And you cut through them without thought, without mercy, because they're in your way. They drop runes when they die, and that's all the justification you need. You are a rune harvesting machine, converting life into power with mechanical efficiency. Even the wildlife suffers your presence. The sheep, the turtles, dogs, the bears and wolves and giant crabs. They're just animals trying to exist in their habitats, and you slaughter them for crafting materials or because they looked at you wrong. The fact that the game tracks how many of each creature you've killed, keeping a running tally of your extinction campaign, should disturb you. But it doesn't, does it? It's just another number to increase, another achievement to unlock. The Round Table Hold presents itself as a gathering of heroes, champions each on their own noble quest. But look closer. It's a collection of killers, each pursuing their own flavor of destruction. Fear, deathbed companion. literally drains the life from those she embraces. D, hunter of those who live in death, is a zealot who kills the undead, not out of mercy but from disgust. Rogier is dying from exposure to death blight, infected by his research into things better left unknown. Even Corin, supposedly a holy man, abandons his post to follow Goldmask's heretical journey. The Round Table isn't a haven for heroes. It's a staging ground for competing disasters. Gideon Ofnir, the all-knowing, might be the only one who truly understands what the Tarnished represents. He spends the game using you, feeding you information, pointing you toward demigods to kill. But when you get too close to your goal, he tries to stop you. Not because he wants the throne for himself, but because he's realized what Marika knew. A tarnished lord is the worst possible outcome. He'd rather the world remain broken than see it united under one of your kind. His boss fight isn't a betrayal. It's a desperate last attempt to prevent catastrophe. Queen Marika has high hopes for us, that we continue to struggle unto eternity. These are Gideon's words, and they're not inspiring. They're horrifying. Marika doesn't want you to succeed. She wants you to struggle forever, to remain locked in an eternal cycle of violence that prevents any actual resolution. She created a problem, and then created you as a solution that's worse than the problem, ensuring that the lands between can never heal, never move forward, never escape the shadow of her golden order. The walking mausoleums, those massive stone creatures that carry the bodies of soulless demigods, are trying to protect the dead from you. They're not obstacles or puzzles. They're funeral processions, eternally marching to keep their charges safe from grave robbers like yourself. When you bring one down and duplicate a remembrance, you're not honoring the dead. You're exploiting them, turning their essence into weapons to kill their siblings. The mausoleums walk because staying still makes them targets for Tarnished, who see everything in terms of resources to be claimed. Malekith, the Black Blade, guards Destined death itself, the concept that Marika removed from her golden order to create the Age of Immortality. When you defeat him and unleash death back into the world, you're not restoring balance. You're weaponizing mortality against beings who were never meant to die. The demigods you've been killing weren't truly dying before this. They were being removed, banished, dispersed. But after Malekith falls, death becomes real again, and retroactively, all those defeats become murders. You don't just kill Malekith. You transform every victory you've already achieved into something worse. The fire giant, last of his kind, guardian of the flame that could burn the Erd tree, wasn't threatening anyone. He was the endpoint of a genocide, cursed to guard the very thing that could destroy what his people died fighting against. He's been standing watch for so long that nature has started to grow on him, his flesh becoming one with the mountainside. He's not a boss fight. He's a living memorial to a dead culture, and you kill him because you need what he guards. You complete the genocide that Marika started, erasing the last witness to her crimes. When you finally burn the Erd tree, using either Melina or yourself as kindling, you're destroying the one symbol that gave people hope. Yes, it was false hope. Yes, the tree was parasitic, and the Golden Order was flawed. But for the common people, the refugees and survivors, that golden light was something to believe in. And you burn it all down because a throne waits on the other side of the flames. You're not a revolutionary bringing change. You're an arsonist with ambition. The tragedy of the Tarnished isn't that you're forced to be evil. It's that you choose it over and over, in small decisions and large ones. Every time you decide to pursue a great rune instead of walking away. Every time you kill an NPC for their armor or weapon. Every time you choose to continue when the game itself, through Melina and others, questions whether this is right. The game gives you a character capable of making choices and then watches as you consistently choose destruction. Because that's what games have taught you. Heroes do. This is FromSoftware's masterstroke, making us complicit in our own villainy while we chase the high of victory. Every boss defeated feels like an achievement. Every area cleared feels like progress. The dopamine hit of success blinds us to what we're succeeding at. We're so focused on the challenge, on overcoming the difficulty, that we never stop to question whether we should overcome it. The difficulty isn't a test of your heroism, it's resistance against your evil. The bosses aren't obstacles to a better world. They're the last line of defense against you. When you think about it, really think about it, the Tarnished's journey is the story of someone who was given a second chance at life and used it to end everyone else's. You were recalled from death or exile, given purpose and power, and instead of redemption, you chose revenge against a world that never actually wronged you. The Lands Between's only crime was existing without you, and for that, you unmake it. As we reach the end of this dark journey through the Lands Between's true narrative, I want you to remember this. The next time you start a new game, create a new Tarnished, and stand in that chapel of anticipation. You're not beginning a hero's journey, you're loading a weapon. Every level you gain, every boss you fell, every item you collect, it's all ammunition for the apocalypse you're about to unleash. The game calls you Tarnished not because you lack grace, but because you stain everything you touch. Thank you for joining me in this excavation of uncomfortable truth, for being willing to see past the heroic facade to the monster beneath. If this recontextualization of Elden Ring's narrative has given you a new perspective on your role in the Lands Between, please consider subscribing to Keen 7 Lore. We're building a community of players who aren't satisfied with surface-level interpretations, who want to dig deeper into the dark hearts of the games we love. Your support helps us continue these investigations, peeling back layers of meaning that developers hide in plain sight. Remember, the next time you face a boss, you're not the underdog hero fighting against overwhelming odds. You're the horror that demigods tell stories about, the nightmare that makes even the Lord of Blood check under his bed. You are the Tarnished, and whether you claim the throne or burn everything to ash, the Lands Between will never recover from what you've done. The only choice you really have is what kind of villain's ending you want to write. Share your own realizations about the Tarnished's true nature in the comments below. When did you first suspect you might be playing the villain? Which NPC's death hit you the hardest when you realized you could have just walked away? And most importantly, will this change how you approach your next playthrough? Or will you, like the Tarnished themselves, embrace the flame of ambition regardless of the cost? Because that's the ultimate irony, isn't it? Even knowing what we now know, we'll still start New Game Plus, we'll still hunt those bosses, we'll still climb toward that throne. We are Tarnished, in-game and out. And perhaps that's the deepest horror of all. Until next time, remember, in the Lands Between, grace isn't a blessing, it's a targeting system. And you, dear Tarnished, are both the weapon and the one pulling the trigger. Stay curious, question everything, and never trust a narrative that tells you you're the chosen one. Here at Keen 7 Lore, we'll keep digging into gaming's darkest truths, one uncomfortable revelation at a time.